Hello and good morning, and welcome to today's panel discussion on intellectual property and artificial intelligence. I'd like to welcome the esteemed panel who have joining us some late at night and others early in the morning today to discuss their enterprise or their project and projects with respect to artificial intelligence. This year, in 2023, we have seen a proliferation of the adoption of artificial intelligence in our business and working lives. It's not to say artificial intelligence is new. In fact, it has been with us for many years. Ever since the 1950s, there has been research with machine learning and computing with respect to artificial intelligence. We call them development ecosystems. That's where machine learning, hardware, and robotics have been advancing our civilization. We're here today to talk about the adoption ecosystem, and that's what we've seen here in 2023. With the launch of ChatGPT in November last year, we've seen the wide-scale adoption of the use of artificial intelligence in our working lives. So we're here to talk about that today. Just a very brief introduction to Tim Parrish, who is the publisher and editor of Art Ex Machina. We also warmly welcome Vinny Romano, who is a director and founder of MySocial.ai, Hawk Gunnison, the CEO of PictureTale from Oslo, Norway, and Azadel Williams from AZK Media. Warm welcome to you all.
Hi, Gareth. Thanks for having us.
Beautiful. So to kick off the discussion today, Tim, here in native Darwin in Australia, you came to me actually late last year with a new enterprise and a new idea. Your background is as a film director, but you're also a graphic novelist and publisher of graphic novels. Tell us a little bit about Art Ex Machina.
Yeah, no worries. So, as Gareth said, we publish a comic anthology up here in the Northern Territory for about the last couple of years. It's called Wild North Comics, with some very talented animators and writers and filmmakers and artists. But about halfway through last year, especially when Midjourney sort of dropped onto the world, I suppose quite a few of us really found that very fascinating. Like a lot of my friends in my community here. We quickly discovered the international, sharing, community that was sharing content, very prolifically, and I got quite inspired by that. I was making a project at the time called Chronos, which I'm finishing now at the moment, but I decided that would be really fantastic to explore using AI to generate it, because the story is essentially about a sort of a simulation theory inspired time machine, in a nutshell. And the funny thing was that immediately, as soon as I started sharing content like that on the Facebook groups, I realized there was many other artists and writers who were doing the same thing and making the jump from just basic image generation into comic book story-based narratives. As a filmmaker, writing and creating storyboards is a very incredible, very useful thing, and I can imagine this is going to become used a lot more for this purpose, but also comic books. So along the process there, I ended up working with a lot of artists around the world who I was in touch with. Chris Castanova, it was one of those people who we ended up publishing in the anthology that we made, which was the world's first really anthology on AI graphic novel art. And also a very renowned artist from the UK called Dave McKean, who did the cover for us. And we did quite an in-depth interview with him discussing the ethics of it. I tried to mix in a mixture of articles looking at the ethics as well as artist statements by each of the artists in the graphic novel. This is the book that we published. It was very beautiful, 220-page book. That features about 20 different artists and articles and essays. Really, and whilst we were making this, the debate really blew up massively, which was really interesting because
we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll talk about but that's just a very basic income introduction to the Ardex Machina project.
Fantastic. And it's a great publication, and you were really at the forefront, really, of the publishing industry and adopting AI, within I guess, a traditional industry. What was your relationship when engaging with copyright, Tim, with respect to putting that? We've obviously worked together on the contracts to help keep a chain of title for you to the right and interest to publish the work. Maybe describe that before we jump then into a further discussion about copyright and Chris's work.
Sure. Well, yeah, of course, it raises interesting questions, especially with the artist Chris Castanova. She is one of the main artists, or featured in the graphic novel. And Chris became very famous because her comic Zarya of the Dawn their comic had been the first one to ever been submitted to US Copyright Office. Even though other people perhaps had been making things, she submitted it there to test out what would happen. And it was, I think, at first accepted last year around September, but then they reversed that copyright around February this year, I believe. And currently it's in much more case by case. So it's just interesting by just doing that act. And in Australia, we don't really have the same kind of process where we would submit something like that. So when we came to putting these contracts together, I mean, essentially with Gareth's advice and other people, we put together a pretty standard chain of title document, because I needed one in order to be able to, make the agreement with every artist about how we would share the profits, essentially, and pay them. And we just basically took it for granted that this was their intellectual property. I mean, in the end, as much as the big question comes up about exactly each image and the influence of each image and how many images might have been used to simulate or synthesize that image, from my perspective as a publisher, there's no question this person wrote a story. The text is theirs, the arrangement of images is theirs, the whole comic is theirs. There's no way that anybody else could pretend it's theirs. It's not theirs. So that was the legal advice, I suppose, we worked on. And, we haven't had any issues with it. No one sued us, and no one's, none of the artists have, and we're very upfront about it. I think that's part of it, is just like being incredibly transparent about your process. This is what it is. This is what the artists are doing. And
everyone is that even though AI tools now may be used to create new products, which should be encouraged, what you've done is you've essentially, as a producer and publisher, asserted the rights, or you've obtained the rights in the correct manner, not only from artists in order to resell the work. That means you having chain of title in order to publish. Intellectual property is a bundle of economic rights, and you as a producer or publisher have an obligation to bundle those rights together in order to sell a new product. That's the same in film, that's the same in publishing, it's the same in AR production and in media and marketing. And essentially what Tim has done is he's actually bundled them together from the artist in the correct way. And I might add also from the AI. Midjourney is one of the platforms, Stable Diffusion is another that graphic artists are using to make new copyright. Essentially, one of the laws that stems from the US, and the same applies here at this point in Australia, is that AI cannot own copyright. So therefore, the obligation, even more so as a film producer or publisher, is to or as a marketer, is to ensure that you have ownership of the AI art, as well as negotiating agreements with any of the other participants. So that's great to see that up and running, with your own publication. Just with respect to Chris, and we'll talk about this with copyright, one of the distinctions between US copyright and Australian copyright, and indeed I understand the same in Europe, is that only in the US is that registrable right. So Chris's current battle, which we can talk about in some more detail, with the US Copyright Office is being heralded as an example of, I believe, the importance of AI art or images or output being recognised as copyright. But here in Australia, it's an automatic protection. And so therefore, again, Tim, it's about the producer or the publisher or the marketer or the marketing agency ensuring they have ownership of it. Back to you. Maybe let's describe a little bit of Chris's work and the background behind it, Tim.
Sure. I don't want to take up all the time, obviously, but hopefully this will launch into all of the expertise that all the rest of panelists have. I'm sure not much more about this than I do. I'm merely a practicing artist. But yeah, Chris's work is interesting. It's a science fiction piece, Zarya of the Dawn. I think one of the bigger questions which it raises, through the process she used a particular image or celebrity prompt, which was Zendaya as the main protagonist, as the actress, or the model for her piece. And that was another question which came up in the discussion with Gareth for legal advice. And we discussed a few elements there as to how much is that illegal? Is it illegal to draw inspiration from someone as a model or as a muse? There's lots of examples of comic book artists doing exactly that. A very famous one was Samuel L. Jackson, was actually used as a model for Nick Fury prior to him being Nick Fury in the films, which was interesting. And I thought to myself, well, if they're allowed to do that, it's very, very recognizably Samuel L. Jackson, then why would we not be able to, do some inspiration? It's not a perfect likeness of the actress, but you can tell it's her. And, I suppose I'm interested in the reason why I felt compelled to push ahead and do something regardless of whether or not the legal framework was clear or not yet is because I think it's just such a fascinating new area for art creation and for interrogating all of these things. And so rather than in the midst of the big debate about AI and whether it's theft or not, whether it's ethical or not, I think there is so much nuance and gray area and a spectrum, rainbow really, of ideas that can be explored. And the only way we can do that as artists is to delve into that world rather than deny it or shame people for, exploring what is actually a phenomenal new technology that could transform our whole entire concept of creativity, industry in so many ways. So rather, that's how I felt about it. Embrace this interesting technology rather than deny. And
embrace the creativity and experimentation in it.
One tiny little more thing that I thought was just a really funny little moment that happened. So the thing about Midjourney is that in order to make a prompt, it's actually the prompt is imagine, right? / imagine. We were discussing what we actually credit people as, like how do we credit this, and everybody had a slightly different way. Made in collaboration with Midjourney, partnered art made by Midjourney with this artist or this writer, things like that. And I had an idea as the editor to actually just sort of skip that and in a way make the credit a # imagineered by this person. That's a different way. It's not exactly created. They imagined it, they envisioned it, they've imagineered it. And then one of the other artists in the group, called Steve Colson, who runs this great marketing agency out of New York City called Campfire, he's like, well, no, you can't use Imagineer. That's owned by Disney. Apparently, Disney Corporation copyrighted the word Imagineered. And if that doesn't say, enough about US copyright law, in my opinion, actually offends me massively, the idea that any corporation thinks they could own a word. And so I chose to ignore that legal advice from him. You might have a different opinion. I just think it's offensive and it's a good word. I like that word. Shouldn't just be Disney designing theme parks for the rest of time. And I guess that cuts to this larger idea of what is public ownership, what is language, what is technology of language, and what is AI.
and how do we use AI to experiment, as you've said, which should be encouraged.
To Imagineer.
Yeah, 100%. You know, like
If we're allowed to say that.
yeah, Disney has had a very long history of, I think protecting, building, and leveraging its intellectual property, which is why it's still a big brand today. And I think that's interesting to note as well. But we need to be able to experiment. We need to be able to use these tools, and we need to be able to also openly discuss them, which is why we're here today. You mentioned also images. I think that's also a really interesting place where we're seeing mashups and experimentation. Vinny, you've sent through some material to me, about artists referencing others, DJs referencing Eminem, for example, and whether they should be able to appropriate, whether it's other people's art or image. And I guess this is also where these engines are also challenging copyright and people's right to even their own image. Let's now move to the more the commercial application of AI. With the launch of ChatGPT late last year, which I see as the most advanced typewriter that's just ever been invented. In fact, just a bit of background, copyright actually began with the printing press. The actual laws began because they gave individuals a pecuniary right to earn money from the things that they create, authorship, the publication of books. And that's how I kind of see it. Vinny Romano and his partner, his founding partner, have been working together on a really exciting platform in the marketing space. Vinny, I might open to you now to discuss this in some detail, a bit of background about this platform, which is a really exciting application of AI in marketing.
Sure, thanks, Gareth. Firstly, let me just say, you opened up by saying this esteemed panel. I'm not sure I can take any credit of being on an esteemed panel with regard when it comes to IP law regarding AI. But what I can do is talk to the previous experience in a very quick, bulleted sort of way in order to arrive at where we have been able to create what it is that we've created. In 2015, I started an agency, a digital marketing, content marketing, marketing automation agency. And what we were doing there was we were creating content for the enterprise, tech, and financial services brands, right? And in traditional agency sense, we were doing a lot of communications for the brand and the company profile itself, everything from, digital out of home to video, online, social media, et cetera, from a company perspective. But one of the things that became a desired service was this series of what are called social selling programs, where key executives within the organization needed to remain top of mind more often. In front of customers, in front of peers, in front of shareholders, investors, what have you. By leveraging their social media networks, in specifically their LinkedIn profiles, we could use our same services to create content for them, whether that be written content, video content, article content, what have you, or audio, podcast content, what have you, right? in the attempt to raise their profiles as individuals, and as such raise the profile of their associated organization, pitting them as thought leaders or at least subject matter experts in their chosen field. And so what it is that we would do for these executives, and I'm talking about executives here, is we would have a copywriter that we would bring on that could write in the tone of voice of said individual if that person didn't have the time or didn't have the capability of writing their own content. We would have a designer on hand to make the collateral pretty, visually able to read or view or watch, etc. Within that, we'd have production and management and then strategy to tie the whole thing together. Now, I know that I'm sort of edging on Azzy's world here, but essentially, these were the kinds of programs that we were creating, and we would be charging. I've exited that agency now, but we would be charging a lot of money for one person within one organization per year to create this ongoing, always-on content marketing, not just for the brand, but for the key individuals within the organization. So you referenced that before. I've been sending you or tagging you on posts on LinkedIn, Gareth, where I've seen, Jay-Z's lyrics being, sorry?
Interesting examples, if I may.
Yeah, Jay-Z, for example, or Eminem, or other artists, whether it be from an art perspective, a music perspective, a poetry, an anthology perspective, Tim, to what you were talking about. And that for me kind of sits over there, and I tag you, Gareth, because of our conversations around IP law and the very limited information and knowledge that I have in that space. What myself and my co-founder, Wayne O'Brien, have created was we were creating these manual processes. Wayne himself was the ex-head of social media and digital marketing at Microsoft Australia. So he was very much advocating for this type of activity internally. And I myself was doing it as an agency or as a consultant. And we had this manual process. Now with the use of technology, the ability to use tools like a Canva, like the application of GPT 3.5 Turbo, or soon to be GPT-4, to create content with a machine learning component that can draft content for you, not necessarily just click a button and hit post, but to provide you with something further than a blank canvas of paper, a blank sheet of paper, in your tone of voice, something that's relevant to your audience, something that's relevant to your interests as an individual, to create an ongoing stream of content for you to be seen, for us, in a professional manner. We can now bring those technologies all into one place, under one roof, using the best practice and subject matter expertise of the algorithm of said social media platforms, such as LinkedIn, to be able to provide you with an experience that provides you with better quality, faster content, which you, Imagineer, Tim, and yes, I will steal that from Disney as well, that you Imagineer yourself and put it into a regular cadence so that you can win in front of your professional audience, no matter what your objective is for doing so, right? And so it's a really, as you said, it's a really fine line between, I disagree with the music industry being, accosted and taken advantage of from people that can, take someone's voice that didn't say these lyrics and turn it into a music track and then make money out of it, if that's what's going to happen, versus you as an individual knowing what your plan is for your own profile raising activity. It would be the same in this instance. It would be the same as, okay, I don't have a copywriter, I don't have a designer, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some primary and secondary research, understand what it is that I know, get some thought starters from quick Google searches. In most instances, I don't want to say most instances, in some instances, people might just copy and paste what they've seen from an article that someone else wrote and not credit that author and drop it into a LinkedIn post. That's different to what it is that we're doing, because we are using an AI copywriter, which isn't the same as searching for stuff on Google. However, there is a whole plethora of other things to consider, and that's the reason why I joined this call this morning, purely from a learning perspective.
Right. Well, then, from that point of view, and thank you for the introduction to mysocial.io, because first of all, we're all not experts, because this is such a frontier area that we're here to learn, explore, and share. And what you've shared, Vinny, is a platform. What I see in mysocial.ai is because I have used the platform. I used it in the very early stages of this year, to generate some content, to experiment. And what I see your platform is actually being a platform that allows content creators to, and I mean authors or anyone that is using it, business owners, to author their own content using an AI engine, thereby creating their own intellectual property. And that's the relationship that I see through many of these platforms, whether we're talking Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or ChatGPT or mysocial.ai. They are platforms to help create intellectual property, and therefore, actually, I think the reason for very copyright beginning is to offer the right for people to earn a living from the things they create, and simply that's how I see your platform and many others out there allowing people that right and that ability. I might just add Canva, because we've had a very brief discussion about it. But Canva, an Australian company, and they just launched only 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, they had another relaunch of some of their products where they're really embracing AI as being their magic within their platform. They use it in various ways, with suggestions or prompts, and even taking and converting, physical or drawing into graphics. And as they explained, as Melanie Perkins explained at their launch, it's simply they've been using AI for a while, but they simply are embracing it to help us become more creative. And so that's the opportunity that I see in your platform and others out there. And I think it's going to be a really interesting journey as we navigate our ways forward. Just in being mindful for time, we might just move on and back to and to now introduce Hawk. Hawk, you've had a very long career in working with various different media. Maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and pitch your tale and your current focus in augmented reality.
Yeah, sure. It's a big topic in covering in about half or 1 hour, right? So you don't even know where to start and where to end, just like in AI. But we've developed a platform for publishing augmented reality content. And perhaps just going straight to the point, last August, we started to look into Midjourney as an interesting way of creating backdrops to scenarios that we used for our augmented reality platform. And we found even I think we started in September last year with Midjourney, that it created some interesting elements. So just a quick comment on that first, on the visual side of things. What we have found, it's kind of interesting. We started first by just prompting, by writing stuff, right? That's the first thing you do when you encounter Midjourney, and you find it interesting, and you see, wow, all these weird, strange pictures. One of the things that I think we've all experienced, who've worked with Midjourney for a little while, it hasn't been around for very long, but is the fact that there is a lack of consistency, right? So if you think about comic books, the problem is, the girl comes in with a blouse and walks out in the next frame with, a big winter jacket. And, so the shape of the characters and the consistency is an issue. However, this is improving almost as we speak. One small thing that we found was if we fed in our own original artwork. So we're essentially using the machine only to prompt suggestions based on our own artwork, instead of actually just sort of prompting it by typing stuff. We found some very interesting things. We did it in a side project that we're having, in a historical setting of Copenhagen in the 1870s. And we have some beautiful artwork done by artists for this particular location. And we used that, fed it into Midjourney, and got back, incredible stuff that was actually quite consistent with the original artwork that we had made. So that was sort of the, let's put it this way, the one step up, right? From just sort of starting to prompt things in the beginning and just sort of seeing, oh, wow, all these strange images coming back, to a much more, I would say, cohesive and really actually quite useful thing, to the point where we see that this can actually be used, maybe with a little bit of photoshopping here and there, whatever. So that's just one piece I wanted to share with you. Another one is, of course, in the copyright field, right? So there are two sides to this, at least. It's what you feed into the beast, right? And then it's what you get out of it. And of course, what we're seeing here, especially with Chat GPT 4.0, is that they're now up to, I think, about 1 trillion nodes, up from 178 billion in the Chat GPT, the previous version. And what you're seeing now, of course, is a mining of the entire web. Like, you know, very soon there won't be another word or sentence, you know, that will be able to hide from these enormous octopuses that's going out there and looking for stuff. But I think that in terms of from the artist point of view, like, for example, Tim, you were talking about, I think that the originality, if you like, of what's coming out again on the other end is essentially now more about looking at things, observing things, and then saying, yeah, this may work, right? I had a friend that was a graphic artist, and he actually only drew some, which I think often happens if you become mightily successful. You make drawings, okay, but then you hand it over to someone in Italy or whatever that has a studio, and they actually work out the details, etc., etc. So in a way, you know, this is new, but on the other hand, it's not that new. So I think it's about, you know, really for the artist, right? It is to essentially, no, that's not quite right. Yeah, we're getting closer. But then, so I see that the future may be a combination of artwork that you're creating yourself, feeding it in, and being able to actually refine it, you know, and use that as a tool, almost like, you know, a set of paints and stuff like that. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Can I jump in there? Because, you know, that is 100% what I'm seeing happening now. You talked about consistency, you know, especially for comic book characters. In that way, it allows, basically by creating a template, which is your character, you define what that is. The more you recycle and refeed it in, it becomes a whole new process. And I'm a painter and an illustrator already before I've used anything like this. So having those skills and then not jettisoning them at all, just maintain and evolving them into another level gives you so much control.
Absolutely. And that's exactly, it's so funny because that sort of really nicely dovetails into what it is that MySocial.ai is doing, is that you come with the knowledge, you come with your experiences, you come with your, you know, no one's born a thought leader, right? No one's born a subject matter expert, but you come as a contributor. And if you know what you're going to contribute, you feed that in, and you have to put something in. You put shit in, you get shit out, right? And if you, it's not to say that, you know, from day one you're going to have the best thing. It's not to say from day one you're going to have a shit thing. It's just, what do you have? What do you have, and what can you start with? And the tools that come with it, and in our case, machine learning, it learns with you what works for your audience, but also what best parts of you and your professional character, let's use your words, your professional character, your professional persona, should you be putting forward, what resonates with your audience in order for you to gain that organic and optimized engagement. You know, so it's really interesting. I just wanted to call that out. Sorry to jump in.
No, that's great. It's a discussion and we're exploring together. And one of the things you said, Hawk, was it's new, but it's not new. And given that you've worked in feature film, then mobile media and now in augmented reality, you've seen a number of different creative processes. And one of the other points that you've all made is that it's a tool. And these tools have been enhancing creativity for a long time. So perhaps it is a good point, but it is not so, it's new, but it's not new. And I think that's the same when it comes to creating valuable commercial intellectual property. When you're selling a feature film, or if you're selling an AR project, or giving other people the ability to create a Vinny, I think what my observation is that simply that our intellectual property laws are about helping us earn or create, or they need to be organised. You need to organise those rights, and so that relationship in asserting a right over the IP of what is new and being created is really important. We might now turn to Azzy, if you like, then we can sort of round out with some final thoughts and reflections from everyone. Azadeh, you are the director of AZK Media. You've worked in media marketing and you have a legal background. Would love to hear your views as to this new exciting frontier of AI production and its relationship to IP.
Thanks, Gareth. And really great to be part of this conversation and this whole movement around AI and its applications in creativity and business and in our personal lives. It's just evolving at such a rapid pace. And the more we discuss it, the more we educate each other and drive those discussions, and also find ways to regulate around and build some boundaries around ethical use of it. I think this is the time for us to really keep those discussions going. It's a really personal passion of mine, and also in our business. So our business, first and foremost, is a technology PR company. So our job is to take 100 million to $1 billion valuation sort of AI companies, BI, data analytics, to get them noticed. So we pretty much work a lot with them to not only get their stories, their news, their press releases out to as many media channels as possible, but we also work to build, enhance, and maintain their reputation within the industry. Our agency, it's only 6 years old, and about 5 years ago, when we were looking at scaling, I met a really good CTO who was part of my network, and had a really good chat over coffee. And he said, why necessarily scale through people? A lot of agencies just throw more people at campaigns. Why not scale with AI? And it really got us thinking about integrating technology and AI into our own agencies. So as an example, when we're interviewing our clients and building content, or going to an event, seeing them at a panel and drafting, and our team draft content, we record that and put that through Otter AI. Otter AI is a great transcription service. It really helps scale our content creation. We use Grammarly, which really helps on the proofing and also ensuring that there's no plagiarized work, to keep the content clean and media ready. And we've recently also been exploring ChatGPT. Now, with ChatGPT, there are some constraints and issues that we have found in terms of generating content. So what we need to do is create very original thought leadership pieces, news. So if that piece of content, if we're writing a press release and there's a chunk in there that we have used ChatGPT for, and there is no attribution to a source, and it has potentially or possibly been taken, ChatGPT has extracted that from some other content piece, there's a risk there for us. So if that piece gets published and distributed in 100 different publications all around the world, and it gets flagged as a copyright infringement, we are in a lot of trouble. So not only are the media publications, they'll be furious at us, their reputation's on the line, our clients' reputations are on the line, and our reputation's on the line. So we have to be very, very careful in how we use ChatGPT. So for instance, we can use it to help come up with some article ideas just at the ideation phase, or research like we did recently for International Women's Day. We wanted to look at some challenges around women in AI. So we asked ChatGPT, hey, come up with some latest research and reports, just send us a nice big list. So it kind of did some research for us, preliminary research, which we again had to vet, come up with heading ideas, or, oh, I'm a bit stuck on this particular paragraph. Can you enhance it or trim it down because our word count needs to be trimmed? Can you rewrite an entire article to make it a bit shorter? Come up with social copy, like with Vinny's innovation. So those sorts of things, we can use it to help save time and enhance and augment content for our clients. But in terms of relying on ChatGPT to just become our content creation team, at this stage, when there's lack of attribution, we are just walking on lava if we do that.
That's a really good point, especially in your area of PR. Moral rights is a subset of copyright. It's the right of attribution and the right to actually treat your art or your written copy in a certain way. So I think it's really interesting what you say, because it intersects with this whole area of what is copyright and how do you build a business in it. And clearly your strategy is to, for the time being, just to be very careful about its use and its implication. Cork,
just a quick comment to that. It's very interesting observation, and you've obviously been at it for a long time. About a few months ago, in an earlier version of ChatGPT, I asked to list the 10 greatest war heroes in Norway from World War II, right? The top 10. And 9 of them were okay, but the 10th guy that I'm sure you've heard of, even if you haven't heard of a single person from Norway during World War II, is a guy called Quisling. I think you're all familiar with that word. It means traitor. But it's also the name of a traitor during World War II in Norway. He actually sold us out to the Germans. But he was one of the 10 war heroes. Now, I tested the same thing a couple of days ago on ChatGPT-4, and he was gone. All right. So that could just be a coincidence, but it's kind of interesting. Now, when it comes to what you just said about the danger of essentially having whole paragraphs, being spewed out to customers, of course, you do quality control and all of that stuff. You're the gatekeeper. But I'm wondering if you've found examples, or if you've heard of it, any of you, where you actually have a specific paragraph that is coming back to you that came from a specific source. I can tell you, I haven't spent thousands of hours, but I've spent hundreds of hours, I'm sure, prompting stuff. And I never actually, of course I haven't checked it, but I don't have the feeling that actually what's coming back is sort of cut and paste from different things. But what is your view on that, if I may ask very quickly?
Supposedly there's software which alloys you to be able to tell if
Grammarly.
Yes, exactly.
So,
if that is,
but from my experience, it's not clear that unless you're asking it specifically to write in a style, which is quite interesting. But what comes to my mind is how much time we probably spend as humans writing the same thing. It's like there's a lot of repetitive nature of office work, of all kinds of level of the media. And, if we look at it from a bigger perspective, in this concept of plagiarism or whatever, especially it's different with text and image, but I do really feel like sometimes we're just doing a lot of busy work for other people. And if there's certain reports or like longer form, boring parts of my work that I have to do, it's so much nicer to work with an AI, speeds it up, do something in 10 minutes. It might have taken you a couple of hours. That's what I think is one of the most interesting things about this, is that how does it make our lives easier? The question of copyright and all these other dimensions and imaginative and employment. I mean, this conversation raises so many questions about how many people are getting cut out of previous jobs that might have been, there. On the flip side, I sort of see to myself, there's an incredible empowerment that we have as individuals, as artists myself. So I don't need to then, work with an entire concept group of artists that would impede a lot of my ideas from being created. I don't have 10 grand sitting around just to hire a concept art team to develop an idea at the very, very early stages of pitching it to a film studio or whatever. But I can create this amazing pitch deck and visualize that, and eventually that'll create some great employment. But I can see that, and I can see with things like Canva and other things that doing the same thing for graphic designers. But honestly, I've worked in the graphic design industry, and that's the most boring work you could ever do. It's not like anyone's like, oh, I wish I did that really small tile for that Instagram page. That was $10 I could have got paid,
Here's something to consider, Tim, right? So in the situation where, you are pulling together a pitch deck, right, where you are going into studio executives and whatnot, before the use of the likes of a Canva or something like a ChatGPT, any kind of technology, you would take your pen to paper and you would attempt to draw what it would look like, right, in its bare basic form.
Sure.
Based on your skills of being able to draw a person, whether that be really sort of stickmanish or something a little bit more 3D, right? Effectively, technology can allow you to have a better first impression of taking something from your mind that you want to look like, but the technology can articulate it for you and represent it in a better way, right? Should that mean that you have stolen from someone? My initial answer is no, right? If on Azzy's side of things, which I completely agree with, if you are using ChatGPT, for example, hit a button to create your press release without the thought and the knowledge of the implications that it's going to have on how bad your reputation is going to be impacted by you simply hitting a button and not proofreading it, then you're up shit creek, and you probably shouldn't be in that role if that's the kind of actions that you're taking. You're right. There are lots of different questions that surround this. The stealing of someone's voice or someone's face, deep fakes and rap music and creating lyrics and monetizing from it, that's bad news. And I think that's going to get cracked down. There's going to be, the music industry has suffered a lot of problems over the past decade. And I think they're going to be hot. They're hot on the track here to, stamp that out. But with regards to productivity and the reduction in jobs, I mean, you just got to look back at when the calculator was invented. There were protests around people not using calculators because it stopped people from learning.
Really?
But now calculators are now, we can use calculators. It's the same thing. And so how can we become more productive with these tools, with the right governance around them, with the freedom to be able to produce what we have in our minds that we might not therefore have the creative articulation to represent it. And I think that's one of the key questions. And just before I run out of time of my talking, this is something that ChatGPT won't be able to produce for you. But if we were to title a conversation like this ever again and have a follow-up discussion, I would call this discussion copywriting.
Well,
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Vinny on we have to remember that they're tools and we have to ensure that they remain tools and not weapons. So let's just use them for good and use them to make our lives easier, to scale with technology. Like Tim said, we don't need to hire massive teams of people anymore to get the same level of creativity and productivity output. We can use all these amazing tools, but then we have to ensure that there's some regulatory parameters around these tools so they don't become weapons and suddenly go out of control and make our lives and also our children's lives absolutely, totally unprecedentedly terrible.
Look, these are all really good points, and what I'm hearing is that there is a great use and your platform for using any of these tools for efficiency, to get started, to create ideation, the early stages of creating new IP. These tools have a great benefit in use. However, they should be used carefully and with a stronger degree of ethical and regulatory reflection. And I might just, before we sort of round off on today's discussion with everyone's final thoughts on the future of AI and perhaps the use of them ethically, perhaps that's where we can leave the discussion today. I just want to highlight a really poor brand reputational risk that has come from following and using an AI, and that's been the robo debt scandal here in Australia, in which the Australian government of all organisations actually utilised a calculation for debt and then issued debt notices, and it was, as far as I understand, was very highly automated. And I really just show that the Royal Commission there and the adoption of AI to perform human tasks should be used very, very in a way that is should be very mindful of the the duty of care that any business or creator uses these AI tools. That's my final thoughts. But perhaps back to you first, Azzy, because I know you've got some further views on the ethical navigating the new pathways there, and then we'll wrap up today for this introductory discussion, shall we call it, Vinny?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to reiterate that the technology is exciting, and we should be quite positive in that it can change our lives. I mean, just over the weekend, driving, it kind of occurred, had a great conversation with my daughter and said, do you know, when we first were driving, there were no cameras, there were no sensors, we didn't have GPS, we had to actually pull across the side of the road, look at a map to figure out where we were going. And she was looking at me like I lived in the horse and cart era, like what? And you just realize how quickly and seamlessly good technology can integrate into our lives and actually make things so much easier. So if we continue these discussions and continue understanding how these technologies can actually make and enhance our personal lives and our productivity in the workplace, and also enhance our creativity in ways we had never anticipated. I mean, look at the application of art, VR and AR is amazing. To immerse yourself in art, I mean, that is just next level. I mean, who needs mushrooms? So this sort of next level, I mean, it's just the possibilities are endless and exciting, but we need to find ways to create those regulatory parameters.
Great, fantastic.
Who needs mushrooms? Great.
Good.
Yeah, that's the slogan. Marketing.
Yeah, that's it.
Admin.
Tim, final thoughts from you on ethics and how to navigate the way forward?
I guess that my thoughts in this discussion really do expand out to the larger implications for human consciousness, and I suppose that it's funny you mentioned that there is almost a psychedelic dimension to artificial intelligence, and I think that that's in the root of the word being mind expanding, and that potentially what we're talking about here, and perhaps Hawk would have a lot more to say about this, but I was thinking to myself, this misnomer maybe of artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, we're still trying to figure out what the best term for it is, right? But perhaps when we're really talking about something that helps and expands our ability, it augments our intelligence. And that could be a better way to start thinking about this technology, because it really is about how much intelligence you bring to it. Whether it's art and creativity, I found that my history of studying fine art, learning to paint, photography, cinema, all of this is a vernacular that when you can speak to the machine and know what you're talking about, then it will understand and come back and give you some amazing results. It's a bit like a superpower to actually know what you're talking about. And then to do the same with ChatGPT, if you were able to order your thoughts in a certain way, then bring that back and then directly communicate what it can then do hours and hours of research for you in seconds, that's a superpower. So I think it's almost like this is an augmented intelligence, and that maybe that's how we should start thinking about how our relationship is to this phenomenal, groundbreaking, mind-blowing, revolutionary technology that is going to transform the entire world around us. Are they our allies or are they our enemies? And clearly for so many people, if they intelligently face it, it's augmentative. So that's my final thoughts.
That's great. And, Vinny, perhaps MySocial.ai is trying to put these tools in the hands of people to become superpower content creators. What's your view on navigating the way forward?
Yeah, I'll use one word, ethics. And I think ethics needs to be baked into applications of such power. Look, without tools like this, you would go away and you would do research yourself, whether that be, going to the library and pulling out citations. If you were to go to Google and, do your research and find references and sources and links, right? I think that there needs to be a call for, at the product development level in these applications where, if you're asking it to do research, if you're asking this technology to do research on your behalf, that the ethical nature of such products or such activity pulls in source links of some description. Where has that come from? Can you reference this? It's the same thing as writing a dissertation at university, because you can't, and it's hard to use the word plagiarism because it's not plagiarism when using AI, but it sort of feels like it's in the same area. And if you are someone that doesn't look at it through an ethical standpoint, and again, this needs to start at the product level, but if you get it into your hands and you are using it in an unethical sense, well, that's always going to happen. That's going to happen whether we have this technology or not. And so I suppose I see a great focus on the requirement of ethics being baked in both at a product level and at the individual level.
Beautiful. Wonderful. And Hawk, having traversed through many different ages of media, what do you see the way forward and the impact of this groundbreaking new technology?
Yeah, who knows, right? I think fundamentally speaking, it's important to remember that everything we get out of it are things that we have put in. It's just reshaped. And I think that, if you think about a sculpture, right, that is actually modeling something in clay. So clay is the material, and from that material, you can create many different shapes and forms, and et cetera, et cetera. So on one level, there is nothing mysterious about this. It is simply just an absolutely incredible way to connect dots in ways that even the human brain has a hard time doing fast enough. So I think that going forward, it is a lot about asking the right questions to this huge cloud, if you like. And if you work from good, whatever that is, I think it's about saving a lot of tedious work, that can now be, in a funny way, more concentrating on really understanding the fundamental questions that we as human beings are facing. So in a way, you go back 200 years when people were standing in factories, and if you think about the Maslow's pyramid, where people, they were just working and eating and dying. And now you can maybe get to the point where we can use this to ask the right questions. And I think so from an ethical point of view, some people will use this for bad. We cannot stop that. If someone buys a gun, we know what they can do with it. But on the other hand, I think that working from good and using this to ask the right questions and liberating ourselves from all that tedious stuff, really, I think is a great promise for the future.
Fantastic.
Agreed.
Can I add something to that, Gareth? It's a very profound question and idea that you're raising, Hawk, and I often feel that as a species right now, we're actually dealing with so many issues, collective issues, global issues that seem beyond the individual or even the nation state. And, you know, especially if you're considering something as existential as climate change, if we ask the right questions to this augmented intelligence technology that we have invented, hopefully it can help us through those things that the collective human political consciousness seems to be unable to right now. That's on the bigger level of what is the great utopian potential of this. Rather, we've been taught this dystopian through science fiction for so long. I think it's actually sometimes hard for us to completely even comprehend the potential of what else could happen, you know, if we look at the positive side. But there's always two sides to every technology, aren't there? So
it is a wonderful way, as you say, Tim, to conclude today's discussion, to ask the right questions. I mean, art, industry, and science have been standing on the shoulders of each other for many a century. And in fact, it was Socrates that informed the Western education system, that encouraged us to ask the questions why. So perhaps with the advent of this new technology, we can embrace our collective future to create for good, but also do it through a healthy mindfulness at the same time. I'd like to thank you all again for getting up early, staying up late, to just be part of a discussion at the threshold of the inquiry towards how we use this new technology. Perhaps it's the first of many. But once again, just thank you to Tim, Vinny, Hawk, and Azadar. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes.
Look, sharing.
thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Gareth.
Good evening, good night.